Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. One of the big questions going into the upcoming season is the CDL going to return to YouTube or stay on Twitch for the immediate future? The big talking point has been lately, we're going back to YouTube. The deal is done. That's what the teams believed at the meeting they had just before the World Championship back in June. The latest rumour is, though, that's not necessarily the case anymore. ZooMaa's sources tell him, and you might doubt ZooMaa's sources, and we'll get into why in a second, that Twitch is still going to be a possibility for the upcoming season. The YouTube deal is not done, and we might hopefully be in for another good season of growth within the Call of Duty League. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, I wanted to mention on this kind of topic in general that FaZe's CEO has been fired, it seems. And, I mean, FaZe has been an absolute disaster for a long time. Currently, the FaZe clan, it's not really FaZe clan, the Call of Duty team for FaZe is operated by Atlanta Esports Ventures, and they license the FaZe branding. There have been some questions. As and when the CDL changes tack, I think it's quite likely that when Microsoft come in, I don't expect it to be city-based anymore. I don't know what they're going to do with the buy-ins, if they're going to go back to an open circuit. We'll see. I think a lot of things are going to change in the next 12 to 18 months. But FaZe, let's say, that no longer happens and Atlanta is no longer a thing. Do AEV still run it? What happens with FaZe? Do they have to step back in and run the thing? Because FaZe actually kind of profit from their COD team in some sense, because they have a licensing fee that AEV pay, and AEV, they're the ones that, have to deal with all the costs. FaZe actually got a benefit right now, but that's not necessarily the case if the format changes. So that's one to look for. There's also big rumors going forwards on the future of COD in terms of 2024 and 2025. This year's game is Modern Warfare 3. It's going to launch with all 16 Modern Warfare 2 maps from back in 2009, the original MW2 before, MW2 of this most recent title. All these names get kind of complicated. So I just wanted to kind of translate what Alberto is saying here, and he's been pretty bang on the money, it seems, with the leaks that he's done over the last couple of weeks. His point is that he's making is that 2025's COD game is to COD 2024 the same as what this year's game is to last year's game, i.e. this year's game MW3 is going to be pretty similar to last year's game with some improvements, but mainly with like all the old school maps, bringing them from back in the day. So the rumor is that 2024's title next year, that's going to be Treyarch's game, right? Black Ops, Gulf War, maybe, I don't know. There's been some rumors as to where they're going to base it. It might be another Black Ops game, something in that line, and I wouldn't complain about that at all if that's the case. That game is probably going to launch, at least according to this rumors, with all of its own maps type thing. But for COD 2025, then they're going to be bringing back, apparently, all the Black Ops 2 remastered maps. Now, this also might mean, and this is kind of, it's poetic in a way, because if you guys know, Black Ops 2 was actually set in the year 2025. So the idea of COD 2025 being like, effectively like a Black Ops 2 remaster with all those old school maps, that's kind of nice, as far as I'm concerned. But what this might mean is that 2024's track title, next year's game, Black Ops Gulf War, let's just call it that, won't necessarily have those maps, because MW3, this new game, has all the MW2 throwback maps, but we didn't get any of those in MW2 this most recent season. So it'd kind of be a shame if Treyarch's 2024 game doesn't have any of Raid, Standoff, Slums, Express, whatever, but yet the year after does, because then it feels like, well, if Raid's there for the taking, just give it to us already, like we had in Cold War. Maybe, maybe not. But it's early days, as Bob says, likely to change. But it definitely makes sense, right, that they might do this. That, like, Treyarch's game comes out, and the year after that, they make a game actually either made by Treyarch again, or very similar to Treyarch, or who knows what Microsoft are going to think on this. But also bring back the old school Black Ops 2 maps in the year in which they're originally set, which it just sounds like something they might want to do. And Jake Hell comments here on it as well. Now, as I say, YouTube gaming versus the CDL, or like with the CDL, has been a massive talking point lately. This was talked about back in February. I remember I went to the Boston event and everyone was saying behind the scenes, the YouTube deal's happening. I can't believe it. They're going to do it mid-season. They're just so, they want all the money type thing. And fair enough, they want the money. Now, this was talked about again in June, that the deal is done. And this was the talking point that Hex had in the meeting they had with the CDL just before the World Championship, that apparently it's a done deal. The CDL's chosen, they've made their mind up. Activision want to do the YouTube deal, and that's sorted. And I think that if Activision were fully in charge, this would 100% be the case. The issue is that Activision have to think about the future. They're not in charge anymore necessarily. Microsoft are acquiring them, and they will be running the show in the near future. Ben makes some very interesting points here that, to be honest, I hadn't considered, and I think it's why it's good that Ben is on the flank to give these insights to the nature of the deal that Activision, or let's say Microsoft in the future, would have with YouTube. Microsoft do a lot of cloud space work. Do they want to deal with Google to use their cloud services and also use their streaming platform? Quite possibly not. Even though Activision quite possibly would. Given the fact that this has been in the works, this deal apparently, since literally February, then they said, all right, let's just wait. And then they were going to do it, it seems, right before the new season. We now heard nothing on this. There's been no updates on it. The rumor apparently says, according to ZooMaa, and look, as I say, ZooMaa didn't necessarily nail it on the Priestahh stuff, but for most things in the off-season, ZooMaa was correct. Okay, he had a couple of takes on rosters that turned out not to be true, so people don't trust his sources anymore, whatever. Generally, ZooMaa got things mostly right, and, you know, on this occasion, he thinks that his sources are strong enough to say that he's heard rumors that this is not going to be the case anymore, and we are going to stay on Twitch after all.
The YouTube and Twitch say we have no idea what's going on with that yet. Which, listen, me personally, guys, I think it's kind of crazy that we don't know what platform we're on, especially because we're trying to plan things out for the next season, and if we don't know what platform we're on, it's kind of difficult. Especially because if we're on YouTube, it changes things a lot. Like, it changes things a lot in terms of, especially for me, like where I'll be streaming and where we'll all be streaming. Ben, you as well, like all of us. So it's something
I'm
that
on Twitch, bro. I ain't going to YouTube. What?
Even if the league goes to YouTube, but you would what? Just full cam on Twitch? You would full cam Twitch?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get that many watch party viewerships. It's not going to change where my audience is, but obviously we're all creators in different.
But I'm saying if we go to the events, right? Know how we multi-stream, like how we all have sort of same thing on our stream. Like if you're on Twitch and I'm on YouTube, how do we do that? We can't.
We'll figure that problem when we get there. I'm not really at the moment, as far as I know, it's YouTube Twitch thing, and Hector talked about it in a recent podcast. They had an ownership meeting after champs. You know, they said the terms of the deal, and there's a good chance we're going to take it. But as far as I know, I don't think there's really been updates since that. So when Hector was talking about the podcast, if you watch the actual clip, that's kind of what he's sort of basing that off of. So yeah. I heard Hector say, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, I heard Hector say that it was 100%. And at the time, like everybody was saying it was 100%. Like I agree with Hector. And now, like as time went by, I've been hearing some other things like behind the scenes. Which makes me think that it might not be 100% yet. But I don't know. If anybody knows the most, it's the owners of the teams, like Hector and Paul and those guys. Like, they probably know the most. And the way that Hector said it made me feel like that we are going to YouTube. It's just weird because I've heard otherwise from like pretty good sources. Yeah. So like I have no idea what to expect. I don't really know what's going on.
Here's the only thing I'll say about it, because again, Chad, I've said listen. If you listen to what I just said, I watched that pod and I'm trying to tell you what he said. But like, I would assume the YouTube distribution deal is part of a bigger deal with Google. And I feel like this is part and tied to the Microsoft merger because of the services that Google provides in terms of cloud hosting. And I'm very curious how that deal makes sense for Microsoft that has their own Azure cloud situation. So unless they're like trying to do this deal to get around antitrust situations, because cloud gaming was a big part of some of the regulatory issues that this merger is kind of going through and still going through before it gets approved. So like, I don't know if it's a 100% certainty. I hope it's not. That like 8 months ago at this point, it's actually just like 6 months ago, and basically said, look, there's two ways to look at it. Either we're going for growth and engagement, or we're going to take the money now. And in Brett's mind, and I agree, the most important thing is creating the marketing, the veneer around Call of Duty esports, that it's a growing esport, which I think is true. And you move to YouTube, you depress viewership, you create this narrative that then your sales team, your marketing team has to boy against. Activision is $1 billion company. We're talking about league operations can't be, they're not the cost of Riot, bro. Like, Activision has the money, they can figure out how to fund it. They don't need the YouTube deal to do it. That's kind of my thought process. They shouldn't do it. We should stay on Twitch.
So I do totally agree with the analysis of the guys there that the YouTube deal is almost certainly not worth the money that they're getting for it. And also you've got to consider that, sure, media rights deals in general in esports will at some point be necessary, and this is the point that Golden Boy made back in June. The issue is, as Nadeshot says, you would be shocked by how little the CDL is being paid for this exclusivity. I promise you, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. This was a tweet that I found out pretty easily because I remembered it quite vividly, that Nadeshot's basically saying that whatever YouTube are paying, probably a lot of the organizations see like none of that. That YouTube money probably goes to covering the cost of actually running the league itself, which probably isn't even that much compared to, as Ben said, what Riot are doing for Valorant. And how much of that money trickles down to the teams? Probably barely any at all, to the point where it's almost certainly not worth it to leave Twitch. We've seen the most recent season. Twitch growth has been immense. Twitch is still really where esports culture lives. YouTube is really difficult to find things. Even the other day, that Sidemen charity match was going on, and I was like, surely I should be able to go to YouTube and it should just be there. It's like the biggest live stream of the entire year. I don't really watch any of the Sidemen content, but I see some stuff occasionally, and surely it should just come up for me or something, right? And then, okay, I couldn't see it anywhere. I then went to the live tab and I tried to find it in there and I still couldn't find it. I had to search for it. I had to search for like Sidemen charity match, and then it came up. I was like, surely this is not the best format, especially for someone that might, watch Call of Duty occasionally, play a bit of COD. The stream's never going to come up for them, Whereas on Twitch, it's a different story. It's more... Twitch is less discoverable if you're like a new streamer, but for discoverability of like a big esport match or for big players, it's definitely better. Like, it's kind of to and fro. YouTube still have a lot to work on, and while I actually prefer watching on YouTube, the viewing experience is better, it's just not as good for the scene, especially when it comes to watch partying, which is another whole debate as to what happens, let's say, with Scump and with ZooMaa. They want to watch party on Twitch. They want to do what they've done the most recent year. They can't do that in the same way. If it's on YouTube and there's exclusivity, they would have to either cover up the whole screen like they used to with ZooMaa, or Scump would have to actually do his watch parties on YouTube, which is probably what they would have to do, but it's obviously not ideal either, and especially not for the growth of the scene in general that we experienced last year. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, if you ask like everyone in the community, the fans, the players, the owners, 99% are going to say we should keep it on Twitch. Some owners, probably like Vegas, Legion, will say, no, give us YouTube and I want that 100 quid in my pocket for the deal, you know what I mean? Like, they'll take any money they can get from this deal, and I get it. But most owners, I know that Brett Diamond was having this conversation with the guys on the flank before as well, they want to see it continue as it is for at least another couple of seasons before they maybe sign a deal with YouTube, maybe when YouTube's ecosystem is better, but also when the money just makes more sense in a few years' time, which maybe it doesn't at the moment. What we had last season is undisputedly, I think, the best for the growth of the space, and frankly, that's what we need to continue showing if we want to make Call of Duty look like an attractive prospect for new teams during this kind of like esports winter period. So yeah, very much intrigued to your perspective in the comments below. Did want to mention as well, I saw this interesting yesterday. In 29 events, the OpTic Dynasty with Karma made maybe not only, but they made 18 finals of 29 events. They won 13, though, of those 18 grand finals. The FaZe Trio have made 18 of 28 finals appearances, which is in many ways equally insane, but they've only won 7 of these. So that's the difference there, really, between what's considered the greatest team ever in the Dynasty. Okay, the best team ever was Complexity in terms of dominance, but the greatest team, I'd say the OpTic Dynasty for longevity and other reasons in addition to that. And kind of why FaZe have never cemented themselves as a dynasty despite the dominance that they have exhibited. At times, especially during the Cold War year, but season like Vanguard really put paid to some of the thinking of them being a dominant force in Call of Duty history. But very much intrigued to your perspective on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.